Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Today I am doing my updated 2026 US Senate elections map prediction for the beginning of the month of October for October 1st. So without further ado, let's get into the video. First things first, I'm going to go over all the states I view as being safe for both the Democrats and Republicans. These are seats that I'm expecting to be won by the party or by the candidate by more than 15%. Of these, first for the Democrats is the state of Oregon. I fully expect Oregon will be a safe Democratic win when everything is said and done. Though it could be around that 15-point margin, I also think Colorado ends up going into the safe Democratic category. New Mexico, I think, will be a little bit more competitive, but I don't think it'll be too much competitive. But I'll also consider this one to be safe to the likely Democrat at this current point in time. The state of Illinois, that is also going to be a safe Democratic seat. Dick Durbin's retiring, but whichever Democrat wins the primary, that will be a safe win for the Democrats. The state of Virginia, like with New Mexico, Mark Warner is going to be a safe Democrat win. Maybe the result ends up falling into likely, but when everything is said and done, fully expect this will be a safe win for the Democrats. Delaware will be a safe Democratic win as well. The state of New Jersey, though the governor's race in 2025 is looking to be very competitive, the Senate race for Cory Booker likely will not be. That should be a safe win for the Democrats. And the last two safe seats for the Democrats are in Rhode Island and Massachusetts. Now, with all the safe Democratic seats, this brings the Democrats up to 43. Republicans still at 31, as I've not done any of their seats yet at this current point in time. Now we're going to go through the seats I expect will be safe for the Republicans. These are all expected to be more than 15-point wins for the GOP, starting with the state of Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, South Dakota, Kansas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi. And Louisiana is interesting if the Republican Bill Cassidy does get primaried, but fully expect will be a safe win. Mississippi, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, Alabama, South Carolina with Lindsey Graham, though it was more competitive in 2020. I think he'll still win there by over 15 points. And also the state of Florida with Ashley Moody, I think will be a 15-point win for the Republicans. So with that, with every state that I'm very confident will be a safe win for the Democrats and Republicans, this puts the Democrats at 43, Republicans are at 46. Now, there are a handful of states that are now going to fall under the likely category. These are seats that I'm very confident are going to go one way or the other, but fall within a 5 to 15% margin of victory when everything is said and done. Now, the first seat is going to be the state of Alaska with Republican incumbent Dan Sullivan. This is really contingent on if former Democrat Congresswoman Mary Peltola decides to run for the U.S. Senate or not. If she does, I think this race could get very competitive. She is reportedly interested in doing it, but has not entered the race yet. So for now, I would leave Alaska as likely Republican, and that's where it currently stands at this point in time. The next state that I have in the likely category is going to be the state of Minnesota. This is going to be Democratic incumbent Tina Smith. She is retiring, so it is an open race. The lieutenant governor, I believe it's Peggy Flanagan, and U.S. Representative Andrew Craig are running for this race on the Democratic side, and I expect whichever of them emerges will win this race by 5 to 15% or so in that range come November of 2026. So Minnesota I would also put into the likely Democratic category for right now. The next state that I would put in likely at this current point in time would be the state of Iowa, where Republican incumbent Joni Ernst is not running for re-election. U.S. Representative Ashley Hinson already has the endorsement of President Trump and will likely be the Republican nominee. And when she goes on to do so, I do believe she will win by more than 5 to 15 points. With Ernst in this race, the Senate race looks like it could have potentially become competitive given Ernst's popularity issues, but without Ernst in the race and a new Republican in the race, given how Iowa has trended in recent years, I fully expect Iowa will end up being a likely state that is won for the GOP. Now, the next state that I'm going to put in likely right now is the state of Nebraska. Now, Nebraska is a very special case because at the presidential level, Nebraska is a reliably red Republican state. But at the Senate level, it just had a Senate race in 2026 that actually ended up being very close. And this was Republican Deb Fischer facing off against independent candidate Dan Osborne. Now, what makes this race interesting for 2026 is that Dan Osborne is actually running again. So that could make things very more interesting against the Republican incumbent, Pete Ricketts. Though I do believe that Pete Ricketts is a stronger GOP candidate than Deb Fischer was, that we will see Ricketts win this race by more than 5 points. It still has the potential to become pretty competitive. But Nebraska I would throw into the likely Republican category. Now, next up, the next state that I would put in likely is going to be the state of New Hampshire. Now, New Hampshire is a very interesting state. This race is open due to Gene Shaheen retiring. Chris Pappas, the 1st District Representative, will be the Democratic nominee. Now, for the Republicans, for a while now, it's looked like that former Massachusetts Senator and nominee for Senate in New Hampshire in 2014, Scott Brown, was going to be the nominee. However, former U.S. Senator John Sununu, who lost to Shaheen in 2008, has expressed interest in running for this race, and the recent reports are suggesting that he will enter this race. So if he does enter the race, I do actually think New Hampshire goes down into that lean Democratic category, as the early polls between Pappas and Sununu have showed a very close race. But without Sununu currently in the race at the time of recording this race, I'm leaving New Hampshire in the likely category of 5 to 15 points at this current point in time. But over the next month or so, as we wait for that Sununu news, certainly could be watching this race getting a lot closer. So New Hampshire goes likely for the Democrats. Now, the last state that I currently have as likely is the state of Texas. Texas, this is going to be one of the likely Republican category. This is a very fascinating race, where John Cornyn, the incumbent senator, is facing a primary challenge from Ken Paxton, the Attorney General, and potentially from U.S. Representative Wesley Hunt as well. Now, Texas is interesting because the Democrats are also running two well-known candidates in the state, Colin Allred and James Tallarico, both of which would be pretty formidable in the general election. Now, what could make this race very competitive is if Ken Paxton defeats John Cornyn in the Republican primary. The early polling has shown that Paxton does weaker in the general election than John Cornyn does. So that could potentially make this race more competitive and maybe even potentially fall under 5 points. But for now, I think we see Texas continue to be over 5 points, but a very important one to monitor for 2026. This leads the Republicans to 50 Senate seats, Democrats to 45, and 5 remaining Senate seats in Maine, Michigan, Ohio, North Carolina, and Georgia. Now, Ohio I want to talk about a little more because it's right around the edge of being a likely and a lean state. Now, I am going to put Ohio right now into likely Republican by the absolutely thinnest of margins. This is Republican incumbent John Husted, who was appointed to fill the term of J.D. Vance, now obviously the vice president. He'll be facing off against former U.S. Senator Sherrod Brown, who Sherrod Brown is a political force in the state of Ohio, despite the fact that he just lost his re-election bid in 2024. He only lost it to Bernie Moreno by 3.6%, getting 46.47% of the vote. On the presidential level, President Trump defeated Kamala Harris by 11.2% at the presidential level. So Brown was able to outperform by roughly 8 points or so. Now, the difference in this race compared to the one that we just went over is that this race is also taking place with a Republican incumbent, not where Sherrod Brown is the incumbent. And John Husted, all things considered in the early polling thus far, is a stronger candidate than Bernie Moreno was, which gives him a little bit of an added boost. But I do still think, given 2026 is expected to be a more Democratic favorable year, we'll have to wait and see how that all goes, but that's what the historical expectations are. That means that Sherrod Brown, at very least, should have a fighting chance in the state of Ohio, even though it's trended a lot to the Republicans in recent years. So I'm giving it narrowly in the likely Republican category, just over that 5% margin. Now we're on to the 4 main battleground states for 2026 at this current point in time. Again, Ohio and New Hampshire, I think you could include in there, maybe Texas as well, but I think these are the main 4 battleground states. Maine, Michigan, North Carolina, and Georgia. Starting with Maine, this is going to be Republican incumbent Senator Susan Collins, and right now all eyes are on the governor of Maine, Janet Mills, if she is going to run for Senate or not. The reports in recent weeks have suggested that she will be entering this race, but has not made an official decision yet. And if that happens, we will have 2 very well-known marquee figures in the state of Maine facing off in a very, very close race. Now, for right now, for Susan Collins going up against any other Democrats not named Janet Mills, this race could be very close. But I do think if it's Graham Plattner or another Democrat in the state of Maine, I think Susan Collins narrowly holds on and wins re-election in the lean Republican category as of today. If it were Janet Mills in the race, having the pedigree of being the governor of the state of Maine, I actually think we see this race flip, where Janet Mills narrowly defeats Susan Collins in this race by under 1 point, needing ranked choice voting to break the tie. Whereas in this current scenario, I think Susan Collins holds on, may still need ranked choice voting, but I think it starts out in the lean Republican category for Collins at this current moment in time. Now, in Michigan, this is going to be an open race as Gary Peters, the Democratic incumbent, is not running for re-election. 3 Democrats are running. on their side, Abdul Sayed, Mallory McMorrow, and Haley Stevens, all of which are in a very competitive Democratic primary, so that's going to have to sort itself out first. On the Republican side, Mike Rogers, the nominee from 2024, is running again after a very close race in which he lost by under 1 point in 2024. Now, Rogers may have a stronger chance this time around due to the fact he will not be facing a competitive Republican primary and has all of the Michigan GOP backed up behind him. But at the same time, without President Trump at the top of the ticket to drive voter turnout, Republican turnout in Michigan could be lower in 2026, and that ultimately, I think, leads to Democrats winning the state of Michigan by a lean Democratic margin of a little bit over 1 point at this current moment in time. So that's the state of Michigan. Now we come down to the state of North Carolina, where this is Republican incumbent Tom Tillis. He is not running for re-election. It is an open race. Now, the Republican RNC former chair, Michael Whatley, already has the endorsement of President Trump. He will be the Republican nominee. Whereas on the Democratic side, the former governor of North Carolina, Roy Cooper, is running in this race, and he'll be the Democratic nominee. And this is going to be one of the most close and most expensive races in U.S. history for the Senate races for 2026. A marquee name in the state, Roy Cooper has won tough election in 2016 and 2020 in his two governor bids, and is trying to do so again at the Senate level. I've detailed this race in a lot of very important videos of how Roy Cooper could do and how past governors running for Senate could do. Typically, governors have a tough time running for Senate, but usually it's in states that are much more at a disadvantage to their political party. North Carolina is a 50-50 swing state, essentially, and that gives Roy Cooper a much stronger fighting chance, kind of on par with what we saw Rick Scott do in Florida in the 2018 Senate race. So for right now, I think Cooper and Whatley ends up being a very close race, but Roy Cooper ends up narrowly eking out a win by under 1 point in a very close Senate race, marking the first time since, I believe, 2008 that the Democrats won a Senate seat in the state of North Carolina. And lastly, we have the state of Georgia. Democratic incumbent Jon Ossoff is running for re-election and will be facing off against one of the Republican contenders right now of either Mike Collins, Buddy Carter, or Derek Dooley. Now, President Trump has not weighed in yet on this Republican primary, so that's still up in the air. Governor Brian Kemp has endorsed Derek Dooley. However, the early polling, though it does show a competitive primary, that Mike Collins is leading over Carter and Dooley at this current point in time. As for the general election, the polling has been pretty close in a lot of recent polls, but Jon Ossoff has shown to have a steady lead of a few points over Collins, Carter, and Dooley. So much so that I think this race may end up going to a runoff, but I do think we see Jon Ossoff win re-election in the lean Democratic category over 1 point, but under 5. So right now, for the month of October, the beginning October 1st, I have the Republicans winning 52 Senate seats, Democrats winning 48, with the main close calls being in Georgia, North Carolina, Michigan, and Maine, and just outside of that margin in New Hampshire and in Ohio. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to hit like and subscribe to my channel if you did. I post at least one new video every day going over the recent election news and election predictions and such that you're not going to want to miss. Thank you so much for watching. Hope to see you in a future video.